and welcome back to the Revenue Performance Accelerator by Rev Partners. I'm Nikki, and I'm back to guide you through Course 2 of our RevOps Fundamentals certification, Revenue Operations Expanded, Business Models, and Maturity. In our first course, we talked through the ideal strategic foundation of revenue operations. We defined RevOps as the science of sustainable growth. We established the importance of a comprehensive data model as your framework for growth. And we learned how the RevOps flywheel drives continuous optimization, turning chaos into predictability. Now we're moving from the universal fundamentals to a strategic blueprint. The power of RevOps is that it makes your revenue predictable, efficient, and scalable. But it can only do that if it's perfectly tuned to your specific business model. A mismatch between your strategy and your operations guarantees friction, wasted spending, and inaccurate forecasting. This course is about making sure your engine is perfectly tuned. We've got 4 critical modules to cover today. First, strategic foundations. We'll start with a high-level overview of go-to-market motions and the core revenue models that your operations must support. Then, GTM, or go-to-market maturity. We'll define what operational maturity really means, and we'll introduce each level of maturity and how you can grow and increase your business's maturity levels. We'll go through the path from tracking to forecasting. We'll show you how to leverage primary and secondary KPIs to start actually moving through those maturity levels from level 1 to level 3. Then, in our last module, we'll look at the growth potential of full maturity. We'll look ahead at the strategic end game, level 4 and 5 of maturity, and understand how integrating finance and retention metrics unleashes exponential growth. All right, remember that engine framework that we talked about in course 1, how your revenue engine has to be perfectly constructed? If you skip any of the building blocks, that engine's going to misfire. Well, RevOps is the strategic layer. It's the blueprint that ensures all those foundational pieces are in perfect alignment. In this, we're going to actually action that strategic blueprint. We start at the very top, the strategic choice that dictates everything else, your go-to-market motion. Your go-to-market motion, GTM motion, is your strategic path to the customer. It's the highest decision that dictates the complexity of your RevOps processes and your tech stack. Let's look at the 3 most common archetypes. PLG motions, or product-led growth motions, are when the product drives acquisitions, lead generation, upgrades, expansion. Think of free trials or the freemium model. Customers start by getting value before they ever talk to sales, if they ever talk to sales at all. Think about Spotify for PLG motions. This motion requires RevOps to support low-friction, high-volume motions. You need a seamless integration between the product and the CRM to actually track usage data, registrations, contracts, and then trigger automated lead scoring based on activation, not just form fills or sales demos. In the second, sales-led growth, SLG, this is a more traditional model of direct sales engagements where sales is driving acquisitions and expansion. It's really common for high ACV complex enterprise businesses where acquisition is driven by BDR and AE partnerships with outbound outreach and nurturing efforts. The focus here is on maximizing sales efficiency and pipeline health and forecasting accuracy. For RevOps, it's really important to maintain clear, clean lead routing and territory management and fast processes to actually close sales and get renewals, in addition to discovering expansion opportunities. The third I have listed here, not that these are any specific order, but the third I have listed here is the hybrid or middle out approach. It's the blend of product-led and sales-led efforts. Think about it in terms of a free trial where the customer can upgrade themselves, or a direct sales team could engage for enterprise add-ons or expansion upgrades. This is often the most complex motion to operationalize because it requires everyone to manage a delicate handoff process and maintain complete alignment between the product's self-service user base and the direct sales team. You have to clearly define the point, the usage metric, or the company size, or the feature activation, or the engagement itself, where the customer transitions from a passive user to a sales qualified opportunity for expansion or upgrade. Most customer journey visualization is overly simplified in a nice, tight little funnel showing customers going through awareness and then education and then decided to be a customer. Like magic, it's just so simple. But reality is a lot messier than that. This is more accurate to what your prospects are actually doing. They're all over on their own individual missions. They're on their unique journeys. Some of them move backwards, some of them exit in different places, some end up looping back. And then, even when they are customers, the journey doesn't necessarily end, especially for recurring revenue models, which we're about to dive into a little deeper. But seriously, how would you account for those customers that upgrade, downgrade, or start the sales process again for a new service line in a nice, neat little funnel? You wouldn't. That's why it's critical to drill in and get the details in the clearest way you can. Again, the data model you use needs to accurately reflect the entire revenue journey of your customers, including all the messy post sale activity. That's where insights come from. You have to capture the messy middle and the chaotic nature of modern buying processes and turn that into something meaningful. That's why I talk a lot about the need for not only a comprehensive data model, but also the importance of tracking cross objects. What do I mean by that? I mean, translating what the customer is actually doing into CRM speak. Bear with me, I'll explain. The way modern purchasers actually interact and buy, as we've just established, isn't clean, but it must be tracked. And if you remember my harping from class 1, it must be tracked in a single source of truth. But databases like CRMs, the most common sources of truth, they don't always line up with this messy journey, right? Let's think about it using the actual data model as an example. For instance, when a person views your website or is served an advertisement, that's the first interaction with your company, right? So that is where the revenue journey should begin. But you don't have actual identifiable information on them yet. At this juncture, they're anonymous, pretty much. They're a visitor, a session, nothing more. They're certainly not a lead at this stage. They're certainly not a contact. But that's how most CRMs would define them. At this stage, they don't actually have a contact or company object. It's traffic data. So in CRM parlance, the metric that begins the revenue journey is traffic data, like you see here. This then becomes contact data once a conversion happens. But even that isn't comprehensive. You can't track the entire journey using only contact or company data either. So already we have two objects at play when we're thinking in terms of a CRM. We have traffic and we have contacts. Then, as the revenue continues to move along its journey, we add deals and or opportunities, depending on what you call them. When a viable sales discussion begins, it turns into that object. And then, even post-sale, post the close one deal or opportunity object, you have yet another finance data object. That is the one that you're really trying to get to anyway, right? It didn't start out as trackable revenue when they were just a visitor to your site, even though that is when their ideal individual buying journey began. This is what I mean by needing a data model that follows the money and follows it cross-object through the entire process. This is how you start taking that chaotic flow that we saw in the last slide and capturing it in a clear, actionable way. Now, this particular slide is only showing the drill down into the journey up to the sale. But as I just said, that's not the end of the story. Depending on your revenue model, you'll need an entire right side of your data model, the finance side, to be just as detailed as the one you're seeing here. Let's talk about those revenue models. Your RevOps strategy must be entirely aligned with how you make money. If you're tracking the wrong revenue metrics, you're tracking the wrong goals. So let's talk about some of the core models. I'm actually going to start here in the middle with recurring revenue because that's the most commonly used revenue model for SaaS businesses. It's the model that shows revenue from ongoing service subscriptions or contracts that repeat over time. Depending on the company, you might see revenue goals reflected as monthly recurring revenue, MRR, or annual recurring revenue, ARR, something like that. For the recurring revenue model, the focus for drilling into the revenue journey will be to ensure product categories are clearly labeled so that you know what is actually your primary recurring revenue to be counted on each year and what is actually just one time fees or charges that shouldn't be factored into your forecasting. Think implementation fees or onboarding that are tacked on in addition to recurring revenue, but only for 1 year or only for certain time periods. Usage based or consumption based revenue models represent revenue earned by charging customers based on how much of a product or service they consume, such as cloud credits or API calls. Or the comparison that I use most often for partners is think about your water and energy bill each month. The costs vary depending on what you actually consume. This model adds complexity to forecasting because revenue is a variable, not static. The best way to ensure that you can accurately forecast, detect expansion opportunities, and spot potential churn risk is if you have all of this data directly integrated into your CRM or ERP, your single source of truth. That way you have complete visibility. And then, okay, of course, back up to the top, the non-recurring revenue. This model is revenue earned from one-time transactions or purchases, like perpetual software licenses or a service project with no follow-up contact. This one is kind of self-explanatory. Growth potential comes from repeat purchases or cross-sells or upsells into a higher tier or a different category. Visible revenue can only be operationalized when it's captured comprehensively. Remember, visible revenue comes from adding those volume or conversion metrics tracked up to the point of closed won deal to your revenue metrics. And the end result is actionable insights into revenue. You must track both the volume metrics and the financial metrics cross object to truly understand your performance. And when you put it all together, this is the data model that you get. This is why we designed the revenue performance model this way. Takes all that chaotic buying journey and it translates it into clear, actionable insights.